It's very easy to get caught up on that end goal, whatever it is, whether it's, bringing in $100 million or launching that new product or whatever. But it's literally it's the little things that aren't so little, but it's those little things that you can do every day that, man, they get you to where you need to be at the end of the day. But you got to keep that discipline.
Welcome back to the Ways of Working podcast, your weekly dose of practical tips for senior leaders looking for that performance edge without burning themselves or their teams out. Today, we're talking with founder of the School of Grit and graduate of Kokoro Camp, which is the civilian Navy SEAL training equivalent, Brad Ritter. Brad, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, what's up, Jimmy? Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate this and looking forward to it, brother.
Likewise, I try not to say this, but I am genuinely excited by having you on the show. And I want to, the thing that was exciting to me was the two words grit and Navy SEAL civilian equivalent training. I want to go straight there. What is Kokoro Camp? And can you just tell us a little bit about that experience and how you ended up in that experience and what you learned from that experience? Because I think there's some really great lessons in there.
Yeah, how much time do we have, dude? Because I could talk about this for hours. There's a lot.
We'll go as long as our conversation is fun for everybody to listen to.
Right on, man. So, yeah, as you said, I graduated from Kokoro Camp, which it's based on Navy SEAL training. Now, I'll be the first one to throw my hand up. I don't want to be a Navy SEAL. Still don't want to be a Navy SEAL. I'm much too old for it. But what I liked about their training, what I knew of their training, was that they were considered some of the baddest people on the planet because of what they put themselves through, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I thought, man, if I could just get a taste of that, wouldn't that make life just a little bit easier? Not that life would be easy, but if I could learn some of those tools, some of those tactics to deal with high pressure situations without my life literally being on the line and being in life and death situations, man, how would that translate to, I'm a dad, so I've got kids and, I'm married and dealing with, relationships and, I have a W-2 job as well. So I've got that and work with a lot of folks all across the country. So that's Kokoro Camp and kind of what got me interested in it. Cause when I tell people, oh yeah, I signed up for this camp where they put me through 50 hours of training and no sleep and minimal food, they're like, why would you do that? Like, are you crazy? And I like to tell people, no, I'm not crazy. I'm just not you. But what really spoke to me about this camp was I probably had a little bit of a different life than maybe some of the other people you've interviewed or some of the motivational speakers and things like that that you see. You hear their speech, you see them on YouTube. Man, they've had just loads of usually adversity hit them in life and have just gone through some traumatic experiences, whether that's, dealing with cancer, let's say, or being deployed or, you name it, right? There's lots of ways adversity can hit you. Well, I did basically a little soul searching in my early 30s and just discovered that, man, I haven't really had that, whether that's luck of the draw or whatever. And not that you want that type of crap to hit you, but with life, like it's just a matter of when things are going to hit you in the face. And what I came to the conclusion was, Jimmy, is that my life had been a little bit too easy. Really, I'll just go out there and say it. Like I was too comfortable, and comfort can be a slow death. So what I was really looking to do was shake it up and really see what I was made of, because I had never put myself purposely into a situation where I would be pushed, past my brink physically, mentally, emotionally, to really see, what my character is and who I was. And, a lot of times we can look at ourselves in the mirror getting ready to go to work or go to school or whatever it is you're doing. And we can tell ourselves lies after lies after lies about like what we are, what we look like. But I just wanted to get real and really just strip all that crap away and see what was there. So that's why I chose that camp, man. It wasn't just a beat down camp. Yes, there were beat downs for sure. No question. And I broke several times, but the cadre there, the coaches were just the most professional, and they taught me different tools and tactics to get through different moments. And man, that's just something that I have not forgotten. In fact, I wrote a book on it because I
Mhm.
wanted people to learn those tools and tricks without having to get beat down for 50 hours straight. And then I show people how to apply that to everyday life, man. So that's the big answer to the question, the multiple questions you put in there. And I'm sure we can dig into a lot of individual things here.
Absolutely. And when I think about our earlier conversations and some of the parallels that are drawn between what you went through with Kokoro Camp and what I went through in British Army officer training, there's some very strong leadership parallels. And I want to start there because our listeners are senior leaders who are looking for that performance edge. And often we look outside to how can I dial up the team KPIs, or how can I increase the pressure on the team, or how can we launch a new product or create a new service, or it's always an external factor. But I think what you're talking about here is much more of you've got to go inside first, right? You've got to look in the mirror first. You came from a corporate, traditional middle class working life, and you had essentially, as you said, a very comfortable life. What was that moment where you said, I am too comfortable? And why did you just choose to go and do the hardest thing? What was it that led you to that? I'm comfortable and I need to do something different. I need to prove myself. I need to go and get into the hardest potential training in the world. What were you looking for?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that sort of man in the mirror, person in the mirror moment, because it's obviously not just for not men, women obviously have these moments. We all do, collective humanity. And I literally had one though, and it was in my mid 30s. I'll never forget it. It wasn't nothing. Here's the thing, man. It's like there wasn't one moment in my life that I could point to. It was just a collection of just the years of questions, and it was truly driven internally because for years I would struggle with those questions of who am I, what am I here to do, purpose. I know that gets thrown around a lot
Mm-hmm.
these days, but it's true. It's like, man, what is my mission? Like, what am I here on earth to do? Is it to work this corporate job the rest of my life so I can get a nice retirement and then, retire down in Florida or something like that? Like, man, all that sounds nice, but there's got to be more to it, And
Mm-hmm.
too often, I find people identify themselves with what their job is, So, and that's a whole nother conversation we
Absolutely.
can go down.
Yeah.
But I did too, man. I would identify myself with, if you were to ask, like, who's Brad Ritter? I work for XYZ company and I do this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, nah, it's not really what I'm looking for. Like, deep down your butt, like, who are you? Are you a family
Mhm.
person? Are you, what do you like? What don't you like that type stuff. But anyway, back to that moment. I was in my early 30s getting ready to go to work, and those same questions popped up, man. And I just, what I did? I listened to them, and I got an intuitive hit, and I took a mental health day back before there was such a thing, probably back then. Now it's quite popular. I totally
Nice
believe in
mainstream.
them.
Yeah.
But back then, at least in the States, that was probably frowned upon because it was very much, the rise and grind mentality. And we still have that somewhat. But my gosh, if you need to take time off just because of stress or whatever, and, quote unquote, get your mind right, do it. Because that's what I
Mhm.
did, man. I listened to those voices, and instead of just dismissing them and going to work, I actually called in sick that day, and I spent some time searching. I spent some time reading, and I went online and I typed in those words like, purpose, passion, things like that. And I read probably for a couple hours just all these different, as you can imagine, there was no shortage of content that pops up on the interwebs when you type that stuff in. And I
Mhm.
spent a couple hours just reading all kinds of posts and blogs. And at the end of it, I wasn't any closer to answering those questions. In fact, I was probably even more confused because they would ask me more, those blogs were asking me questions I just couldn't answer, man. These are deep questions. And
Mhm.
and chances are you're not going to be able to answer those questions right away. It's going to take some time. But what you'll find eventually is those questions will be answered from within if you take the time to kind of slow down and really start listening. So knowing that, I I'm a big fan of video. Like I use YouTube all the time to figure out how to, you know, work on my garage door or, you know, you name it. So I'm all the time on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. So I thought, you know what, I'll go on YouTube, see if there's a cool video. And luckily for me, there was. So I typed in purpose, and up pops a TED talk that literally changed the trajectory of my life. So this
Wow.
was kind of like my moment, right? And I'll never forget it. It was a TED talk delivered by a lady by the name of Angela Duckworth, and she wrote a book called Grit. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, grit, what is it? So, you know, Angela says grit's the power of passion and perseverance to achieve a long-term goal. And in her studies, you know, many years of studies, interviewing thousands and thousands of people from all different walks of life, from inner city school teachers to, you know, high stress sales jobs to military personnel, the leading indicator and predictor of success in life was grit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I'm on to something here, right? So I bought her book, read it front to back, and basically grit can be grown, which is amazing. It's not a fixed thing. It's not like, okay, you're born and you've only got this so much grit. No, it can be grown. You can
Mm-hmm.
also lose it, but it can be absolutely be grown.
Like fitness, right? Like a
Like
muscle.
fitness, absolutely. It's consistency over time. And you can grow it from the inside out, and you can grow it from the outside in. Growing it from the inside out is more what I would say, you know, self-help, that type stuff. She goes on to say it's a combination of like interest, hope, deliberate practice, and there's one other thing. But you could also grow it from the outside in, which was eliciting the help of like a coach, a mentor, or putting yourself in an immersive experience, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, that's going to shape you, form you. Like I'm sure you went through boot camp or, you know, whatever version of boot camp with your service.
Yep.
See, I never did because I'm a civilian, but I often, having a lot of buddies in the military, I often wondered, like, could I have done that? Or like, what would that have been like, that shock to the system, so to speak. So I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted to find what I now call a school of grit that I could go to, that could, you know, unlock my potential through that
Mm-hmm.
purposeful adversity. So I go back onto YouTube and I type in world's toughest civilian training, and up pops Kokoro
So you
Camp,
went for
which
like the hardest one straight out the
I
bat.
did. That's how I'm wired, man. Is you could ask my wife. It's once I get something in my head, like I'm jumping in with both feet. Like it's 0 to 100. Once I'm
Yeah.
bought into something, and that might take a while, but like if I believe it and I'm in, like then I'm in, you know, and I'm going
Yeah.
all out. It's the same thing with, you know, your job, your kids, whatever, you know what I mean? And yeah, so up pops this camp, and it's put on by a gentleman by the name of Mark Devine. He's a retired Navy SEAL. I think he had about
Mm-hmm.
20 years in, and he runs two companies. One's called SEAL Fit, the other's called Unbeatable Mind. And the video, I'll never forget this either. If the TED Talk sort of changed my trajectory, this video probably changed my life because it got
Mm-hmm.
me to attend the camp, and I wouldn't be here talking to you had I not done that. I can retrace it all the way back to there. So Mark's addressing a class that's about to go through Kokoro Camp, which is modeled after Navy SEAL Hell Week. And if you don't know anything about the Navy SEALs or how they train, they go through a program called BUDS, which stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL. Every one of them has to go through it. And inside of that 6 months, there's something called Hell Week, where they're literally up about a week with no sleep. They do get fed, but it's just constant, you know, physical, mental, emotional. Let's just call it torture, because that's what it looks like
Mm-hmm.
to me on the video. And they're wanting
Potential
to get
discovery, I think we call
right. Yeah, and
it.
their job, like, they're not there to like teach you during that time. They're there to weed you out. So if
Mm-hmm.
if there's 200 dudes that show up and they're at peak physical condition, I mean, I'm talking Olympic athletes, professional athletes, you name it. Out of 200, they may get 30 that last
Mm-hmm.
at the end of 6 months. And I knew this just from studying, and I thought, man, what those 30 that stay, what do they have over the others? And it's mental toughness. It's
Hmm.
emotional resiliency. It's really the 6 inches between your ears that we all have, our brains, how we think, metacognition, inner dialogue, all that good stuff. So Mark is he's addressing this class, and he looks out at this class, and they're formed up. They have no idea what's about to happen to him. Only he does, and the rest of the cadre. And he says, rejoice in adversity. Rejoice in adversity. How do we grow as human beings? It's through adversity. Warriors seek out the severest of schools in order to forge their character. Welcome to the severest of schools. And man, when I heard that and saw that, I still get goosebumps. I got goosebumps, and the hair just rose and on the back of my neck, and I thought I gotta go there. Like I don't know. I have a hard time explaining exactly why, but I just
Hmm.
know it's going to be so transformational for me, and I feel like I'm going to really find out who I am and be able to answer that question, eventually. So
And it sounds
that's
like you did
that's a
find
long
out, right?
story.
It sounds like
I
you
did
did
I did
find
find it. I
out.
mean, that's what I'm here. That's what I'm doing. Right now. That's part of my
Mm,
my mission and all that is what I'm doing with School of Grit. But it never would have happened had I not took a giant leap of faith and put all your chips in, went all in, trained my butt off for it, dedicated my life to passing it, and that was the result. None of I would like I said, I would not be here talking to you right now had it not been for that one simple decision to say, yeah, you know what, I am going to listen to my gut for once, and
mm.
I'm gonna start searching for some of these answers.
And thank you for sharing the story, because it is, it's fascinating to me that you as a civilian chose to put yourself through that. And obviously, not every listener is going to go and sign up for a SEAL experience or a SEAL like experience, but there are some great lessons to be had for putting yourself outside your comfort zone. And it's something I know we talked about this previously in the explore chapter of the book we've got coming out. It's about, you've got to get outside your comfort zone. You've got to try new things. You've got to be curious. You have to, there's a great formula in the book Peak Performance, which talks about stress plus rest equals growth. And so it's that whole stretch your comfort zone, so your comfort zone becomes bigger by doing things that put you outside your comfort zone. This was obviously, yours was the extreme version, but I was wondering, can you tell us can you give us an example of a moment during that experience where you you were probably ready to call it a day, you were probably ready to quit, and you kept going because you wanted the growth that came from it. You kept going because you wanted to realize what your potential was beyond the standard stresses that most leaders face on a daily basis. Too many meetings, too many emails, whatever it was. You were at a different level of inner grit. Could you tell us a story about where you found yourself in that moment and what you did?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I wanted to quit was literally within the first hour. No joke. And I knew what was coming too.
Yeah.
And to equate this to, work, lot of times we know, like, okay, this big meeting's coming, this big speech, this whatever, so we can prepare for it. And if you don't prepare accordingly, well, that's your own fault. I mean,
Mm.
joke's on you. So I knew the first 2 hours there was going to be an evolution called breakout, or shark attack, maybe, as they're also commonly known. And what that entails is all the cadre, all the coaches come down from the stairs and they surround the group. And then all of a sudden, what happens? Just pure chaos is what happens. Someone's on a megaphone trying to give instructions. People are in your face, yelling, screaming. They're hosing you down. They're making you do every calisthenic you can possibly dream up. And they're basically smoking you and trying to get you so disoriented that you don't know what's going on. And it works. Super effective. And I'll never forget it because it was July. The sun was beating down. It was probably like 85 degrees. I did mess up. If I had it to do over, I would not have had coffee that morning because it dehydrated
Mm.
me. I would have hydrated myself with water. I was so thirsty, man. Like about an hour into it, I'm done, right? I can't go any harder. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, I've spent, the last 6 months of my life training for this experience, 50 hours. I can't even make it through the first hour, but let alone that, like, if this first hour is this, like, how am I going to do this for 49 more hours? Like, it's impossible. It's impossible. There's no way. And that's when the doubt started creeping in, man. And I literally thought about quitting. I was like, oh, you know, it was a good fight, right? Like I gave it all
Mhm.
my head. But to your point, that's one of the things that kept me going was like, no, I'm in this for the long haul. I knew this would happen. What I need to do, and there was two things that really got me through that point. One was going back to my why, the reason why I was doing it.
Mhm.
And my why at that time, which is I still have this why with me today, was to be the best version of myself so I could show up and be the best father and husband and friend, brother I can possibly be. So a lot of it that was intrinsically motivating for my family. And then the other thing that got me through was, and we could talk about this later, they teach what they call the big four of mental toughness, because mental toughness can be taught. And one of those components is proper goal setting.
Mhm.
What do I mean by that? Well, in this particular situation, if I would have focused on the finish line with that chatter in my mind of holy crap, there's no way I can last another 49 hours. I'm barely making it through this hour. I would have crumbled.
Mhm.
But instead, I turned that inner dialogue into, all right, I'm just going to make it past these next 10 push-ups that they're asking me to do, or I'm going to make it past, you take that big goal and you chop it down into smaller manageable chunks. And what that does is, for one, it makes it way more believable for you that you're
Mhm.
actually going to do it. But then it actually gives you some positivity, man, because it's like you set a little goal, you achieve it, boom, you got that. Now you set that next little goal, cool. Now I'm going to crawl over here, and I'm going to do that. And now you're building up, your habit stacking, reaching little mini goals in order to get your big one. So yeah, that's the very first time I thought about quitting was like the very first hour, man. No joke. And I looked over after that particular evolution was done. It probably lasted about 2 hours. So just think about
Mhm.
2 hours of doing every calisthenic you could possibly ever dream of. No food, no water, people yelling, screaming at you, and you'll have an idea of what that felt like. And there was about 50 of us that reported. Guess what happened after 2 hours? We had already lost, I think,
There's
5 to 7
25 of you
people.
gone.
Yeah, yeah, and not quite 20, not yet. There would be that number because there's only about 25 of us that lasted. And but I looked over and I didn't even realize other people had already thrown in the towel because I was just so focused in on what I was doing and not what the other team was doing. So
There's some great lessons in there, and so many similarities in the things we talk about. One of the things that came up for me there was your motivation activation reward cycle. And so sometimes, yeah, when we set these gigantic performance goals, I need to last 50 hours, we need to make $10 million, whatever it
right.
is that the performance goal that your team is going for. It can seem really hard, if especially if you're tired and burned out, which a lot of people are right now. It can seem really hard to get motivated and to do that. But actually, if we hack the cycle and just start doing small things, focus on the smaller achievable, we get a bit of reward momentum. We do something small, we get a good hit from dopamine. I achieved something, I'm ready to take on the next bigger thing. And that chunking down into smaller pieces, I really like that concept from a strategic implementation of performance, but also from a personal implementation of grit and resilience, especially when people are dealing with burnout. It's like, I don't have to get through this year. I just need to get through this meeting and do a good job in this meeting. And I just need to make sure I do a good job on this email. I need to just make sure this one-on-one that I have, I show up and be the best leader I can possibly be. And I really like that idea of I just have to get through this next bit and then focus on the next bit. It's because we can become, as senior leaders, we can become obsessed on the long-term stuff, but actually it's about the now, right? It's the presence of mind. It's the inner
Yes.
resilience.
Yeah, 100%. It's very easy to get caught up on that end goal, whatever it is, whether it's, bringing in $100 million or launching that new product or whatever, but it's literally it's the little things that aren't so little. But it's those little things that you can do every day that, man, they just they get you to where you need to be at the end of the day. But you got to keep that
Mhm.
discipline and not look past to it, and not rest on your laurels either. Like keep pushing, and then constantly, if you're part of a team, constantly checking in with your team too, just to see how they're doing, so on and so forth. I mean, that's something I'm sure we were going to talk about as well. But Kokoro Camp it's not designed to be like Rambo, where it's like they're selecting like one person or something like that to make it there. No, it's not that at all. It's definitely a team event. Like, you will not get through that weekend without working as a team, and that is super important in it with today, and performance of companies, and so on and so forth. Because I mean, like it or not, you're on a team. You've got a team you work with, you got someone you report to, you're all part of the team. So you got to make sure everybody's sort of carrying their weight.
It's fascinating. I did a lot of research on the Navy SEALs when I was writing the book, and they said the difference between the teams that get through BUDS and SEAL training are the ones that aren't successful are a group of high performing individuals. The ones that are successful are like a murmuration of birds. And when you see like birds in the sky and they're all kind of moving as like this liquid unit around each other. And when one moves, the rest move to compensate. And when one drops, the rest drop to pick to sort of, to be with them so they avoid the threat of predators. And so there was this beautiful kind of organic resilience in the team, the concept of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go there next. I want to go in toward the idea of performance coming from you as a leader, not doing it on your own. Actually, you're doing it as part of an organic murmuration of birds. You're doing it as a flock. What did you pick up while you were going through Camp Kokoro that made you, maybe it was an insight or maybe it was a validation of what you already realized, that this was something we're going to have to get through together, and the real grit almost comes from the collectivism that we're doing it together. Performance comes from doing it together.
Yeah, they had this evolution called log PT, which you may be familiar with,
Oh
but
yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, okay, so you know exactly where I'm going. But imagine like a telephone pole that weighs, I don't know, 300 pounds on up, and you've got your team of 5 to 6 people, and you gotta hoist this telephone pole up, and then they're gonna ask you to go up over your head, go it from shoulder to shoulder. It's the ultimate teamwork experience, because if someone's not pulling their weight, or if someone's out of sync, you all are going to suffer, and it's going to be terrible. However, if you are acting as a team and you're synchronous, like those birds you were talking about, it can be the easiest evolution ever. You could go all day on it, but all it takes is for one person not to contribute, and whatnot. So we were doing log PT. It was kicking our butts, as you can imagine. And what they did was they took the best performing team. We were right in the middle, but they took the best performing team and the worst performing team, and they switched the leaders out. So the leader from quote unquote the worst team went to the best team, and then the best team's leader went to the worst team. And what do you think happened?
I can imagine that the team performance started to shift.
Team performance shifted. The best team slowly started not doing so well. The worst team, that good leader brought him up. And that was to illustrate that, at least in this scenario, there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. So, how does that transfer to, where you might be working? And granted, it could depend. I get it. But chances are, if you got hired, it was probably a rigorous hiring process. You had to go through several steps, several interviews, and all that. So you were good enough to quote unquote make the cut, because they try to get rid of the people that they don't think are going to be successful. And not that some people can't slide through. I get it. But it really is leadership, and truly leading people. So you leaders out there, if you're in those positions and your culture sucks, or you're like, damn, I'm on a bad team. Why is that? Look in the mirror, like we talked about at the beginning. That starts with you. I've been there too. Those are some tough conversations, but that's where you just got to check your ego and try some different things. If what you've been doing isn't working, that's the worst thing you can do, is just keep on plugging along and with your head down in the sand, make some
What
different
are some of the
decisions.
questions that you would recommend leaders ask themselves if they're not seeing their team perform that are those look in the mirror questions? What would you recommend the questions be?
I think a really good question that just popped in my head when you asked me that is, would my team follow me if I didn't have a leadership title? Because you don't have to have a title to be a leader. And likewise, I know a lot, or I've worked with leaders who had the quote unquote leadership title, but they weren't very good at motivating,
Mm-hmm.
at
Yeah,
getting
we talk.
people.
We talk.
Yeah.
I feel like our lives are overlapping. We talked about this last week in our mastermind. The difference between positional power and personal
Oh
power,
yeah.
and the fact that leadership is a mindset, not a job
Mm-hmm.
title. And yeah,
Absolutely,
you're
man.
completely right.
Absolutely. And I mean that's something I see a lot. Like I mean, I worked many years in big corporate America, and lots of management positions, whether it was senior level, middle manager, whatever. That was one thing I felt that just lacked, though. There wasn't a lot of training on how to lead teams,
Mm-hmm.
because that's ultimately that's what it is you've got a mission, you've got your goal for your team. Well, now you gotta you gotta get your team to follow you. Well, that a lot of that starts with trust. They're not gonna follow you if they don't trust you. So then that's the other, like, man, how do you build trust? And I guess what? It's not it's not easy, and it's going to take some time. But I would
Mm-hmm.
definitely want an open door quote environment where people could come to me with anything, and they know I'm not just going to quote unquote get them in trouble or have the spotlight put on them. You know what I mean? That's what you need.
Mm-hmm. So if we go back to our log example with this extreme performance requirement and you switch the leaders out and all of a sudden the bad team starts to become a good team because the leader is
Mm-hmm.
different, that leader isn't some superhuman who is manually lifting the log themselves,
Nope.
right? They're doing different
Yep.
things.
They're doing different things. Yep. They're
And I
telling
think
people to
that,
switch out if they need to on different sides of the log, because maybe height's if you haven't done this, height's a consideration. So if you're not all of
mhm,
similar height, well, if I'm super tall and someone's super short, there's a problem. So you're going to have to make someone go up towards the front of the log, push them towards the back, and that's what a leader does. That's what a leader should do, is be able to take yourself out of that little scoped tunnel vision and say, okay, I need to move some people around, and then we'll be able to handle
mhm.
this a little bit better. Yeah.
And it's that difference between doing the task and supporting the people to do the tasks. It's that shift out of I have to be the one who is in charge of everything, has all the answers, solves all the problems. And the log analogy is great, but it could be finish this project, it could be run this meeting, it could be execute this piece of the strategy. Your job as the leader is not to do all that stuff. Your job is to be like the conductor of an orchestra, or as you say, to be the person who's standing back from the log saying, hey, let's shift a few people around. And if we try this, and how can I help you? And what needs to
Yep.
happen here so we can all get through this together?
And I always appreciate a leader because I mean, you have to delegate as a leader, or I mean, at least you should. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's what you have a good team for. But I always appreciate a leader who would also get their hands dirty when the time came. You know what I mean? Sort of like get in the trenches with your
Mm-hmm.
employees. I've seen the other end of that, where it's like you almost wonder, like, what do they do all day, or do they just tell people what to do? You know what I mean? I see you're shaking your head, so I know you've had some
Absolutely.
experience with that.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the level of seniority of leader that you are. And if you're a frontline manager, you probably have a fair balance of delivery of task versus supporting your team to deliver. If you're a C-suite person, your task list is different, right?
Hmm.
You're focused on organizational structure and how do we drive culture and how do we support the business to create the performance that we want? How do we lead with the board alongside us? So there's a different focus of tasks on the task list. But absolutely, you still have to be. You don't have to be the example of the hardest working leader. You just need to be the leader that is showing that they are showing up.
Yeah,
If that's the way.
100%.
How am I going to?
Yep. And if you're that C-suite leader, I mean, I encourage you to go work with one of those frontline reps, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
because you will lose your perspective, especially if you haven't done that job in a very very long time. Because things change
Absolutely.
every year. Things change dramatically. So you might have a skewed perception on, oh, well, this is how I did it when I was a rep 15 years. Well, guess what? 15 years ago, lots changed. So I encourage you to go out now and see how the customers have changed, see what the new trends are, see what the new competition looks like, that sort of thing. That's what I mean by getting
Absolutely.
dirty, especially for a C-suiter. Yep. And
And as a leader,
always listen.
it's inspiring, right?
It's inspiring. I mean, people want to see that, and always listen to listen to the person on the ground is what I'm trying to say. So, if you've got this strategy you've spent many months on working on, and you get more than one report from like the people down the trenches saying, hey, this isn't going to work and this is why, you should probably listen to them. Yep, you should listen to them. And if that means scrapping your plan, so be it. Pivot. You're gonna get you're gonna get shot in the foot, man.
Operational performance improvement,
Yep,
right? If we go back to sort of the lean Six Sigma stuff, go to the Gemba, go to the place where the work is done, ask the person who is working on that conveyor belt, ask the person who's doing their sales meetings, ask the person who is doing the manual work, how could we make this better? Because you as a senior leader might not necessarily have the context or the detail that's driving all of the performance results up through the business.
Exactly.
Brad, I honestly, I could talk to you for hours on this stuff. I'm genuinely fascinated, and I'm sure other people would be interested to connect with you as well. If people want to reach you and have a longer conversation, if they want to find out more about the School of Grit, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, just go to my website. It's probably the easiest way. Just go to schoolofgrit.org. So that's .org, not .com, because I don't own that domain, but just go to schoolofgrit.org. You'll find all my contact information is on there. If you want to drop me an email, it's brad@schoolofgrit.org. I respond to all my emails. So that's the easiest way. And then I'm on social media as well. So feel free to direct message me. Love to help you out.
Amazing. And we'll pop all those links in the show notes so people can find it as well. If you were to leave our listeners with one lesson that you picked up at Camp Kokoro, or that you've learned as a result of your work with the School of Grit now, what would be that takeaway lesson that you would encourage leaders to focus on if they want to get that performance edge?
Yeah, I'll tell you a lesson that was passed down to me with the very first person I interacted with at Kokoro Camp. We had a senior Navy SEAL. He was actually active at the time. I won't mention his name, but he came and he told us, you will be successful if you can do these three things and these three things right. And I'm thinking, oh man, I better write this down. It's so important. It's so simple, and I use it every day. So I encourage you to internalize this. Breathe, think, and execute. So by breathing, you give yourself a little bit of time to formulate a good response instead of reaction. Let's say breathing also helps to calm yourself down, lower your heart rate, all that good stuff. So, the next time you're in a big high stakes meeting with a customer, you're talking to your boss about a raise, that type of thing. So breathe. I want you to think. So by breathing, you're going to allow yourself some time to think. You're going to think of a good and appropriate response instead of having a knee-jerk reaction. And then execute. Do it. Take a massive action. Do what it is that you just thought of. So breathe, think, and execute, and you'll be successful. Pretty easy, huh?
Simple.
It works.
It sounds simple.
And it works, man. It's so simple, especially if you got kids out there. I encourage all parents to try that when they're spilling food or doing whatever. Like, I'm going to think, I'm going to breathe, I'm going to think, and I'm not going to explode on them.
Brad, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I genuinely appreciate your time and wisdom, and I'm sure that we're going to have future conversations in a whole lot of other angles, because there's so many things I think we overlap, and we think the same about performance and how you can reach those next level performance goals that you're thinking about as a senior leader in the organization. If you enjoyed this episode of the Ways of Working podcast, please make sure to drop a comment or a review in whichever platform you listened on, and also subscribe using whichever platform that is your favored one. We also welcome comments and messages. Both Brad and I will respond to every message that you send. So if you've got a question, you want to reach out, or you want to learn a little bit more, please do find us in the show notes and drop a line. Other than that, wishing you a wonderful day and see you on the next episode of the Ways of Working podcast.